You don't forget the sound of a knock like that, the kind that splits the morning silence like a blade. I thought someone had died, but what came next, it wasn't death. It was something stranger, colder. The HOA people I didn't even belong to had sent the police to my doorstep, my vineyard, my home, and I had no idea why. 3 days before that knock, everything was golden. The sun stretched across the vineyard like it always did, soft and lazy, kissing the grapes with light. I was up early, walking the rows with my dog Jasper, who barked at the birds but stayed close. I remember feeling content, not the giddy kind, just that quiet, deep kind of peace that settles into your bones when life finally fits. This vineyard wasn't just property, it was the prize after the storm. A failed marriage, my father's death, and 17 years of saving all of it, poured into this land. 4 acres, a creaky little house with a blue tin roof, grapevines I'd nursed back to life with my own hands. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And best of all, there was no HOA, no one to tell me how tall my grass could be or what kind of mailbox I needed until they came anyway. When the cops showed up, they weren't gentle. There was no, "Hi, how are you?" Just checking something. They were all radios and boots and serious faces, ma'am. "We've received reports of illegal irrigation and unauthorized land use," one of them said, hand resting on his belt like I was some kind of threat. I blinked. Still in my flannel shirt and mud-stained boots, confused and irritated. "Irrigation, I mean?" "Yeah, it's a vineyard. It's kind of the point. I'm not part of any HOA if that's what this is about." They didn't answer me. Another officer started walking toward the greenhouse. Jasper barked, hackles up. My heart raced, not with fear, but with disbelief. That's when I saw her. I didn't know her name yet, didn't know her story, but I knew the look: perfectly blow-dried hair, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a sword. Her smile said everything her words didn't. She wasn't just inspecting. She was hunting. She stood on my property like it was hers. I would come to know her as Karen, the kind that makes your blood boil and your jaw clench. But at that moment, she was just a stranger with too much power and no business being there. The first warning came 6 months earlier, and I didn't even know it was a warning. A flyer shoved through my gate. No stamp, no return address. Just rules printed in cold, bold letters. Remove unapproved structures. Lighting must be HOA compliant. Unzoned sales subject to penalties. I laughed when I read it. Actually laughed, because it was absurd. Whispering Pines. The gated community over the hill was miles away and had nothing to do with me. I wasn't part of it. Never applied. Never signed anything. So I tossed the flyer in the trash and forgot all about it. Big mistake. Because the next time they showed up, it wasn't with paper, it was with badges. The cops walked through my vineyard like it was theirs, inspecting vines, tracing their fingers along my water lines, peering into my barn like they were about to find stolen treasure. All while Karen stood near the gate with that smug, silent look. "You'll need to cease operations," she said later, after the officers had moved to the side of the property. "Excuse me?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. "You're in violation of multiple ordinances." "What ordinances?" "I'm not even in your HOA." Her smile didn't budge, actually. "You are." Whispering Pines voted to annex bordering properties 3 months ago. "You didn't respond to the notice, so we assumed consent." I felt like someone had pulled the ground from under me. "Assumed consent?" I said, half laughing, half panicking. "That's not how this works. You can't just claim me." "We filed paperwork," she replied, already turning to leave. I watched her go. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Just stood there with dirt on my hands and rage rising in my chest. The paperwork came next. Warnings, notices, threats. I called the sheriff, the city clerk, even my cousin who worked as a paralegal in Sacramento. Everyone gave me the same shoulder shrug. If they filed the annexation with the county and you didn't contest it, it might stand. I didn't contest it because I didn't know about it. The next day I received a fine, $5,700, for unauthorized agricultural operation. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. This was how they were going to break me. Not with bulldozers, but with red tape. But I'm not easy to break. I started digging. At first, it was just angry Googling. But then I found the Whispering Pines HOA board meeting records. They weren't public, but someone, an anonymous hero, sent me screenshots from an internal email thread. And that's when I saw it. The HOA had voted to expand their jurisdiction. Because of declining property values and a nuisance vineyard on their east border, it's my vineyard, it got worse. Karen, the woman who stood on my land like she owned it, had tried to buy this property 3 years ago, back when it was falling apart and listed in a silent auction after the previous owner defaulted. She'd bid. I'd won, and she never forgot it. This wasn't about vines, it wasn't about zoning, it was about revenge that night. I didn't sleep. I watched the surveillance feed from my driveway on my phone, fingers curled around the baseball bat next. To my bed, I thought about my dad, about how proud he'd be of the vineyard, and how furious he'd be if he saw what they were doing to it now. I almost gave up, but then something changed. The mail came. No return address. Just a yellow envelope with my name scribbled in black marker. Inside was a copy of the Whispering Pines HOA charter. Highlighted in neon pink was a single line. The HOA shall not exert authority beyond its original borders without unanimous consent of the bordering property owner. Unanimous consent. That meant me. I'd never signed anything. Never attended a meeting. Never voted. I wasn't one of them. Suddenly I had a sliver of power, so I called the county land office at first. The clerk brushed me off, but then I asked her to pull up the file number listed on the HOA's annexation claim. 5 minutes later, she came back. There was no file number. No legal annexation had ever been approved. It was a bluff, a giant orchestrated bluff, and they'd sent the cops based on it. I sat on my porch, staring out at my land, and I felt something new rise up inside me. Not fear, not anger, resolve. I wrote letters, I contacted the local news, I filed a counterdash complaint, and then I did something petty. I installed a massive sign on the edge of my vineyard, facing Whispering Pines. Big bold letters, red paint, not part of your HOA, stay off my land within 24 hours. Yeah. Karen showed up again. No cops this time, just her and 2 men in polo shirts, one holding a clipboard. You're violating community harmony, she said, voice clipped. I smiled. So now, you're concerned about harmony? You need to take the sign down. No, I don't, I said, walking right up to her. Because guess what? You don't own this land. You never did. And the county has no record of any legal annexation. You've been trespassing. You've sent law enforcement based on false claims. And now, I'm coming after you. For the first time, she blinked. You don't know who you're dealing with, she hissed. Oh, I think I do, I said. You're just someone who doesn't like losing. You've lost. 3 years ago. Get over it. I turned and walked back into my vineyard. She didn't follow. That evening, I opened my mailbox to find another letter. This one from someone inside Whispering Pines. They didn't sign their name. Just wrote, I'm sorry for what they did. If you ever need proof that Karen forged consent forms, check with the notary office. Some of us didn't know what she was doing. My hands trembled. This wasn't over, but now I had something more than land. I had proof. They messed with the wrong woman, and I was done playing nice. They thought they could scare me with uniforms and threats. They thought I was just a farmer with no connections, no leverage. But they forgot one thing. You don't back a cornered woman into the dirt and expect her not to rise. You don't trespass on someone, a soul, and think there won't be a reckoning. They came for my vineyard. Now I was coming for their lies. You're going to want to stay with me for what happens next, because trust me. When I showed up at their next board meeting uninvited, with a surprise witness and a box of forged documents, everything changed. They wanted to ruin me, but I was about to show them what regret really looks like. Stick around. The story's just getting started. And you need to see how far they went and how I brought it all crashing down. The Whispering Pines board meeting wasn't a place I ever thought I'd step into, especially not wearing muddy boots and carrying a beat-up cardboard box. But there I was. Their clubhouse, marble floors, velvet chairs, more chandelier than. Scents smelled like lavender and control. I didn't belong. That was clear from the second the security guy at the door squinted at me and asked, "You lost?" "No," I said, brushing past him. "You all are." Inside, Karen was holding court like she always did, lips tight, voice crisp, eyes scanning like a hawk over everyone who dared to breathe in her presence. But when she saw me, her eyes widened for just a second. A flicker of recognition. Fear and something else. Shame, maybe. She recovered fast. "Ma'am, this is a closed session," she said, her voice echoing in the glass-paneled room. "Good," I said. "That means you'll want to keep what I'm about to say between us." Every HOA member turned. Their perfectly pressed shirts, overpriced colognes, fake smiles, all of it froze. I placed the box on the table, carefully, deliberately, like I was setting down a grenade. "What's this?" Karen asked. I opened the flaps and pulled out a stack of forms. "Consent to annexation," I said. "Signed by me, apparently. Only, I didn't sign a damn thing." She went pale. "I had these checked by a forensic handwriting analyst. They're fake." A collective murmur rippled across the room, and I added the notary stamp. "Not real either. The county confirmed there's no notary by that name in the entire district." Karen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You forged documents," I said, "submitted them to the sheriff and used them to get cops sent to my land. That's criminal fraud. That's harassment. That's misuse of public services. And I'm filing charges." Silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was seismic. A man near the back, gray suit, blue tie, neatly trimmed beard, raised his hand timidly. "Is this true?" I asked. Karen didn't answer, but it didn't matter. I had their attention. Now I turned toward the door, not waiting for applause. I didn't need it. I just needed them to know I was no longer playing defense. But even as I walked out, heart pounding, I knew this was only the beginning. Because people like Karen don't just disappear, they double down. The next few days were oddly calm. To calm, no new notices, no cops, no flyers. I almost let myself believe the storm had passed, almost. Then the email came. It was from an anonymous account. No name, no subject. Just one line. "Check the zoning board agenda. They're trying again." I clicked the link, and there it was. Plain as day. Proposal to reclassify parcels east of Whispering Pines for community development and code enforcement jurisdiction. My land. They were going above the HOA now. It's going for my throat. If the zoning board passed that reclassification, it wouldn't matter what I'd proved about the forged documents. They could legally claim oversight, fine me, regulate me. It'd been pressure me to sell. I had 10 days. 10 days to stop a plan that was months, maybe years in the making. I needed help. And help came from the last place I expected. Her name was Melissa. I'd seen her once or twice. Walking a little terrier down the road, always smiled politely, never lingered. But this time, she showed up at my gate with a bag of groceries and a manila folder clutched in her hand. "Mind if I come in?" she asked. We sat at my kitchen table, chipped linoleum, a jar of homemade grape jelly between us as she opened the folder. "I used to be on the Whispering Pines board," she said, "until I found out what they were planning." She handed me printouts, emails, meeting minutes, scanned documents. Karen's signature was everywhere. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. She hesitated. Then she looked at the framed photo on my shelf, me and my dad. It's leaning on the old tractor, faces sunburned and smiling. "Because this land doesn't belong to them," she said. "And because I have a vineyard too. Just smaller. And I know what it means to fight for it." I blinked back tears. In that moment, it didn't matter that she was from Whispering Pines. She was one of us, together. We built a case, emails proving intent to deceive the zoning board. Witness testimony from former board members, even a confession from a notary who admitted being paid cash to falsify a signature. When zoning day came, I wore my vineyard boots. Again, people stared, whispered. But this time, I welcomed it. The boardroom was packed. Karen sat in the front row, flanked by 3 suited lawyers and a smug smile that dared me to try. I walked up to the microphone, folder in hand, heart thundering, like hooves. "My name is Elena Moore," I said, voice steady. "I own the property at 27,260 Vineyard Road. I'm here to formally object to the proposed reclassification and to expose the fraudulent efforts that have led to this hearing." I laid out everything. The fake annexation, police harassment, the zoning manipulation. Melissa stood up behind me, nodded, and handed the board copies of the evidence. I could see Karen stiffen, and then I played the recording. Melissa had worn a wire during her last meeting with Karen. "Don't worry," Karen's voice said, sharp and arrogant. "She won't fight. She doesn't have the money or the time. Once the board flips that land, she sell or fold. Either way, we win." The room erupted. Karen leapt from her seat. "That recording's illegal." "It's not," I replied. "California's a 2-party consent state, and Melissa agreed to be the informant. You didn't know she was wired because you never imagined anyone would stand up to you." The board chairwoman raised a hand, calling for order. She turned to me, eyes wide. "Ms. Moore, thank you. We'll take all of this into serious consideration." Reclassification was denied. But Karen wasn't done. She launched a defamation suit against me the next week. I almost laughed. They'd tried to erase me with fines. When that failed, they tried to outlawyer me. But this time, I had a team, Melissa testified. The forensic analyst testified. Even the deputy who'd first been sent to my vineyard stepped up and told the court he'd been manipulated into taking action based on bad paperwork. The judge threw out the case and ordered Karen to pay my legal fees. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd felt in months. Jasper was waiting for me in the truck, tail thumping. I scratched behind his ears and said, "We did it, bud." He held the line. But I knew it wasn't just about me anymore. People in town started stopping me in grocery stores. "You're the vineyard lady, right? They really tried to steal your land?" Tss. My cousin had a run-in with Whispering Pines, too. It wasn't just my story. It was happening everywhere. I started holding open Q&A sessions at the county library, teaching people about zoning, land rights, how to read annexation notices. People brought maps, deeds, letters they didn't understand. I watched fear turn into knowledge, and knowledge into power. One night, Melissa pulled me aside. "You could run," she said. I laughed. "Run? For what?" "Zoning board council. Hell, the mayor's retiring next year." I shook my head. "I'm just a farmer." "No," she said, "you're a fighter. And people listen to fighters." I haven't decided yet. But something's changed in me. Maybe I'll stay on the land forever. Keep tending vines, teaching others to stand their ground. Or maybe I'll go into those rooms where decisions are made and remind everyone that land, real land, doesn't belong to titles, charters, or signatures. It belongs to people who love it, who sweat for it, who fight for it. They sent the cops to my vineyard, but I wasn't even in their HOA, and now they wish I had been, because maybe then I wouldn't have stood so tall when they tried to bend me. Maybe then I wouldn't have found the fire to burn. Down there lies. They regret it now, and I'm not done yet. If you're still watching, thank you. You need to hear this. No matter who you are, no matter how small your land or loud your enemies, you have a voice. They might knock on your door with badges, papers, threats, but you can still stand your ground. Don't give it up. Don't sell yourself short. Don't walk away because they want you to, because the moment you decide to stay is the moment they realize they messed with the wrong one. Stay till the end, because I've still got more to show you. It's strange what the smell of dirt can do to a person. Some people think of rot, others think of hard labor. But for me, it always brings back one memory. My father's hands, calloused, scarred, always stained with soil no matter how many times he washed them. Those hands planted the first grapevine we ever owned, not in this vineyard, but on the tiny slope behind our old trailer, back when I was 8. He dug into that California clay like it owed him something. Maybe it did. Land doesn't lie, he used to say. People do, Paper does, but land, it tells the truth. I didn't understand it back then. Now, it's all I think about. After the courtroom win and Karen's defamation suit fell flat, I expected the drama to end. Honestly, I was exhausted. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones, where even joy feels like another chore. Peace doesn't come quickly when you've embarrassed the wrong people. 2 weeks after the case, I got a visit from a man in a navy blue suit, polished shoes, slicked back hair, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He stood at my front porch like he belonged there. "Alina Moore?" he asked. "Who's asking?" He handed me a card. "Caleb Nunez, Development and Land, Acquisition Consultant, West Grove Estates." I'd never heard of them, but the name alone made my skin crawl. "I'm here to make you an offer." I crossed my arms. "Not for sale. You haven't heard the number yet?" "I don't need to." He smiled like I'd said something cute. "Everyone's got a price." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Mine's not in dollars." He chuckled, stepped down from the porch, but turned before leaving. "Think about it. Once zoning changes, you might not have the resources to keep fighting." Then he got into his shiny black SUV and disappeared into the dust. I knew I'd hit a new level of war, one that didn't rely on rules or charters, just pressure, silence, and money. That night I pulled out the old photo album my dad left me, flipped through it until I found the picture of him on our first harvest day. He was holding up a single bunch of grapes, proud like it was gold. He never lived long enough to see me by the vineyard. He passed the year before I closed the deal, but I could still hear him reminding me that land is sacred when you've worked it with your hands. The next day, I found Melissa waiting for me by the barn, holding her phone with a pale look on her face. "They're making moves again." She said Karen wasn't done. She had contacts beyond the HOA, people in development, finance, land flipping, and now her new tactic was a backdoor rezoning through a quiet partnership with West Grove Estates, the company Caleb worked for. But that wasn't the real shock. Melissa scrolled down her screen and showed me a name buried in a land interest document. E. Moore. I stared. "That's my name." She shook her head. "Not you, your ex-husband." I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't spoken to Jeff in years, not since the divorce. We split the debts, the property, the pain. He'd always hated the vineyard dream, said it was stupid. That dirt doesn't pay the bills. That I was wasting my life chasing some wine country fantasy. And now he was back as an investor. It didn't make sense until I remembered the land auction 3 years ago. I didn't have enough to buy the full acreage. I'd pooled everything, but I was still $18,000 short. Jeff had offered to lend it not as a gift, but as an investment loan. I didn't want to take it, but he said he didn't care what I did with it. No contracts, just a bank transfer and a verbal agreement. I'd paid him back every penny, but apparently he'd never taken his name off the interest filing. Technically, he still held a minor stake, and Karen had found him. They were planning to use his stake to pressure a partial sale, just enough to allow West Grove to start building roads, laying pipe, opening legal doors to development. I wanted to scream instead. I called him straight to voicemail. The second time he answered. "Alina," said detached. "Like we were discussing the weather, you're working with them?" I asked, breath sharp. "It's just business," he replied. "They offered good money, and technically, I still have rights." "You gave up those rights the second I paid you back. It wasn't in writing." He hung up before I could say another word. For hours, I just stood in the vineyard, fists clenched, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Jasper lay at my feet, silent. Even he seemed to understand something had shifted. That night, Melissa came over with a bottle of wine and a plan. "They're playing dirty, so we play smart." We started digging public records, property laws, financial ledgers. Every whisper that linked Karen, Jeff, and West Grove. What we found was ugly. West Grove had done this before several times. By a minor stake force. Zoning changes, pressure homeowners to sell, then flip the land into upscale subdivisions. Always legal, always quiet until now. Because I wasn't about to go quietly. We went public. Melissa helped me reach out to a local reporter, a woman named Jaya, who covered land disputes and shady development deals. She loved the story. A fiery vineyard owner standing up to a luxury HOA and her corrupt ex-husband. She called it David and Goliath with grapes. Within a week, my story was everywhere. Social media, local news, even a segment on morning television suddenly. The HOA wasn't just a petty villain. They were a scandal. Karen issued a statement through her lawyer calling me unhinged and misinformed. Jeff refused interviews. But the more they hid, the more the public rallied behind me. People started showing up at the vineyard. Not protesters this time, supporters, neighbors, farmers, even complete strangers. They brought food, flowers, signs that read, "No to corporate land theft, save local agriculture, we stand with Alina." I didn't know how to handle it. I wasn't a politician. I was just someone who wanted to grow grapes. But when you fight for your land, people recognize something ancient in that struggle. I gave interviews, shared documents, took reporters on vineyard walks. I even brought them to the spot where my dad's ashes were buried under the oldest vine. The story exploded, and Karen, she cracked. Leaked emails showed she'd knowingly falsified property interest, statements and manipulated meeting agendas to favor Westgrove. The HOA board held an emergency vote and removed her as president. Melissa was voted in as interim head, and the first thing she did, she dissolved the annexation vote and issued a formal apology to me. On camera, it should have felt like the end. But it wasn't, because just as I was beginning to rebuild, I got another call, this time from a lawyer representing the estate of the original vineyard owner, the man who'd lost the land in the silent auction. Turns out, he'd left behind a sealed envelope marked with one named mine. Inside was a deed, one that included the back acre I hadn't even known I owned. The one Karen had tried to zone for a Whispering Pines. Dog parked, it wasn't just dirt, it was leverage. I used that acre to block access to the HOA's back road, the one they needed to maintain their private lake easement. They came begging. Said no. They offered money. I laughed. Then they offered silence, and I agreed. Under one condition, they never touch another inch of my land again. A new charter was written. Whispering Pines redrew its borders permanently. No more creeping annexations. No more zoning games. And Jeff, he signed over his stake in exchange for me agreeing not to sue. I took the paperwork, signed, and handed it back with a simple goodbye. He didn't look me in the eye as I stood there in the silence after he left. I thought about my dad again, how he'd warned me that the world would try to make me smaller, but he also told me something else. The moment you feel like giving up, he said, is usually the moment right before something breaks in your favor. He was right. They came for my vineyard. They used police, lawyers, property scams, even someone I once loved. But I held my ground, because this isn't just land. It's my legacy. And if you're still watching, maybe this is your sign too. Maybe you've got something worth fighting for, even when the odds are stacked and the doors are slammed. Just don't walk away. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. You never know how much power you have until you stand your ground and watch the world move around you. This isn't over yet. What comes next? Let's just say some of the same people who tried to silence me are now asking for my help. Stick around, because the way this ends, you won't believe who calls me next. The last call I ever expected came from a number with no caller ID. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, made me pick up. "Alina Moore?" the voice asked. "Yes, this is Mayor Riggins." I nearly dropped the phone. He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "I've been following the situation out in Whispering Pines. I believe it's time we talk." I paused. "About what?" There was a long silence. Then, "About you running for the open seat on the zoning commission?" I laughed. Out of humor, but disbelief. This was the same zoning commission that sat quietly while Karen tried to rewrite property borders. It's the same board that almost let it happen. Now they wanted me in a chair? I didn't say yes, not right away. I told him I'd think about it, because honestly, I didn't know if I wanted more meetings, more files, more battles. I just wanted to walk my vineyard again without looking over my shoulder. But later that night, I found myself at the edge of the vines, right where the dirt rises slightly on the east side. The stars above were so sharp they looked like they could cut glass, and I thought about my dad. He wasn't a man of many words, but one thing he always said stuck with me. Once, you've survived a fire, you don't run from smoke. So maybe this was my smoke, and maybe I wasn't meant to run from it. The next day, I said yes, but not before I did something else, something for me. I organized a harvest party. It wasn't anything fancy, just a few neighbors, old friends, supporters, and volunteers. We laid out folding tables in the dirt, strung up lights between fence posts, poured wine from bottles I'd bottled myself with a handwritten label, Resilience. Melissa was the first to arrive. Melisse, she brought peach cobbler and hugged me so tight it cracked my back. You made it, she said. We made it, I corrected her. People came in waves, some from town, some from neighboring farms, a few from Melez. As far as 2 counties away, they brought kids, dogs, food. Out. One man played guitar. A woman recited a poem she'd written after seeing my story on the news, and just when the party was in full swing. I saw a face in the crowd I never expected. Karen, she stood off to the side, alone, not quite hiding, not quite stepping forward. Her clothes were simple now, no designer glasses, no heels, just jeans and a windbreaker. For a moment, I felt the fire rise in me. The urge to go over, to say something sharp, pointed, unforgiving. But I didn't. Instead, I watched as she slowly walked toward the table where Melissa stood. They spoke quietly. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Karen's shoulders slump, saw Melissa's hand rise and rest lightly on her arm. And then Karen turned, met my eyes, and nodded. Not a smile, not an apology, just a nod. She didn't stay long, but somehow, that made it feel real. Later, that evening, as the sun dipped low and the vineyard turned to gold, I stood up on a crate and cleared my throat. Everyone quieted. I know I've said thank you before, I began, but I need to say it again, from the heart. I looked around at the faces weathered, strong, kind. You didn't just help me save my vineyard. You reminded me who I am, what this land means, what community means. Cheer rose up. Soft at first, then stronger. And I want you to know something else, I said. The next time someone like Karen tries to steal land, rewrite borders, or scare people into silence, they won't be facing just one woman with grapevines. They'll be facing all of us. Another cheer, this one louder, because the dirt under our feet is more than soil. It's story, it's memory, it's worth defending. Jasper barked like he agreed, and I swear, I felt my father smiling through the breeze. The weeks that followed were different, quiet. Karen resigned from all public boards and moved out of Whispering Pines. Some say she went to live with her sister upstate. Others say she's working as a consultant somewhere in Arizona. I don't know, and I don't need to. Jeff sold his shares in Westgrove and sent me a formal letter of amicable severance. I didn't reply. Melissa was officially elected HOA president in the next election by a landslide, and me. I took that zoning seat. My first vote was to pass a resolution requiring all future annexation. Attempts to have notarized video confirmation of consent, a rule nicknamed the Moore Clause. The press had a field day with that one. I didn't care. All I cared about was that no one else would go through what I did, at least not on my watch. One afternoon, I sat with Melissa on the porch, sharing a bottle of Resilience. She smiled after a sip. You know what this tastes like? What? It's victory? But with tannins. We both laughed. But the truth is, victory didn't taste sweet. It tasted earned. Like sweat. Tears and the dirt under your nails when no one else is watching. That's the kind of victory that matters. And if you've made it to this point in the story, if you've stuck with me through the dust, the threats, the paperwork, the betrayals, I want to tell you something directly. You are not powerless, no matter how small your voice feels. no matter how loud the system roars, no matter how many times they send suits to your door or cops to your land or try to drown. You in fear and fees, you are not powerless. You're not alone either. Because if I could do this, me, a stubborn woman with a patch of vines and a rusted truck, then so can you. You just need to believe that your roots are strong enough to weather their storms, and you need to stay long enough to see the season change. They sent cops to my vineyard, but I wasn't even in their HOA, and now they regret it. Because when you try to steal from someone who's poured their soul into the soil, you don't just face resistance, you face legacy, and mine is just beginning. So thank you for watching, truly. If this story stirred something, and you, share it. Let others know they're not alone. And whatever you do, don't stop standing tall, because the world, God, bends to those who refuse to kneel. This has been my fight. Now it's your turn. Go claim what's yours.